Do you want a better smile gallery? Not sure where to start? Well, this podcast is definitely for you. Welcome to the Dental Revenue Live podcast, where we discuss topics related to dental practices with leaders from the industry. I'm your host, Bill Mulcahy, and in today's episode titled No Photographer, No Problem, Simple Steps to a Do-It-Yourself Smile Gallery, our guest, Zach Sisler from Shippensburg, PA, will share his secrets about smile galleries. Zach is a client and friend of Dental Revenue. He's been practicing dentistry since 2010. Dedicated to continuing education, he is an associate faculty member of the Dawson Academy. We are lucky to have him here today because Zach's Smile Gallery is widely regarded as one of the best do-it-yourself smile galleries in the industry. Nearly every day I speak with dentists about the importance of differentiation. We discuss that if they want patients to see them as different, they have to give them something different to look at. The Smile Gallery is a great place to start. Having resources on your website like a Smile Gallery will help potential patients connect with your practice so they can choose you based on your dentistry rather than the convenience of insurance or location. Although most dentists agree a Smile Gallery is important, I get quite a bit of pushback. I hear it's too expensive to hire a photographer or too hard to take the photos themselves. Months, even years go by before the dentist puts a significant case on their site. The reason I asked Zach to join us today is he has developed a process to build out his smile gallery himself. He has almost 40 cases represented, and each one does a great job at highlighting his dentistry and helping him connect with visitors to his website. Please help me welcome Zach, as I believe his knowledge can be very helpful to all of you. How you doing today, Zach?
Good, Bill. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for joining us. It's really a pleasure to have you, and I think your knowledge about this topic is going to be really, really beneficial. So, why don't we start by just getting to know you a little bit? Why don't you tell us a little bit about you and how you got started in dentistry?
Well, a little bit about me. I'm married with three kids, 5, 3, and 1. So it's a busy time at our house.
Yeah.
I married my wife back before I started dental school. And how I kind of got into dentistry was when we were in undergraduate school, she nannied for a dentist. And after seeing some of the cosmetic and aesthetic dentistry he did, I thought, this is something I could really see myself doing. And I wasn't quite sure what I knew about dentistry at that time. I didn't know really a whole lot. So I started shadowing him. And the more I saw, the more I loved about it. So decided to go to dental school. I graduated dental school back in 2010 and moved out to central Pennsylvania to start practicing dentistry as an associate. I was in a pretty heavily saturated PPO environment where I was the third doctor in a group practice, and it was very fast paced and very just busy is the way I would describe it. And I knew after being there for a year or two that it was just not the kind of dentistry I was wanting to practice or what I had envisioned my career to look like. Yeah. I wasn't getting to do much aesthetics. I wasn't getting to do really a lot of anything I wanted to do. I was kind of just more as the employee role. So from that standpoint, that's when I started to branch out and look for a practice. I found a small practice in 2013. January 1st, 2013, I took it over. And it's in a small little farm town in Shippensburg, Pennsylvania, that most people would not associate Shippensburg and high-end aesthetic dentistry together, because I live where there's also an Amish and Mennonite population where I have people who arrive at my office in a horse and buggy and get out and come in for their treatment. So I think I'm really passionate about this photography topic because I've seen how it's been able to help me grow my practice in an area that maybe you wouldn't associate with aesthetic dentistry or complete dentistry. But over the last 5 to 6 years, just by building a portfolio simply of photos, we've been able to expand our business and also getting back to doing the dentistry I always wanted to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I find it extremely interesting. The more I've been in this industry, and the more dentists like yourself I've spoken to, some of the stories of how they got into it are just so fascinating to me, because it always seems to be a person that they happen to connect with through another connection that leads them to dentistry. And I think it's really neat, and just the concept of and one thing that we'll talk about a lot during this call, I think, is the concept of the type of dentistry you would like to do. I think is the primary theme at the heart of this. It's like, if you want to just attract the patients that are in your networks of insurance, that's one thing. But if you really want to do some of the cases that you've been trained to do, some of the cases that are more rewarding, it takes being able to promote that and market that effectively as well. So that's great. So before we really get started into the topic, I got one more question I've been asking our guests. Why don't you share with our listeners sort of a fun fact about you that we wouldn't know if you didn't tell us?
So let's think about this. When I was in undergraduate school, I took a pottery class. And so pottery has been a little bit of a passion of mine that I love to do, and I was actually doing it up until a few years ago, going and throwing clay on a wheel and making vases and cups and bowls, all kinds of different pieces. And it was kind of like a nice little outlet from dentistry. It was still it was artistic, even though I don't consider myself a hugely artistic person, but it's something that I love to do. And if I get the chance to kind of do some more of it, I hope to.
That is a fun fact. And one thing I'd say about that is, I can remember, like, in middle school art class, trying to do pottery, and it was never like my thing. I liked it, but it was terrible. Some of the ashtrays and little cups that they had you make, my mom still keeps, and I'm like, oh my goodness, look at this thing. So it's definitely a cool hobby, but it's takes a special hand, I think, which is why I'm not a dentist and you are. No, that's great. That's great. So let's get on to our topic with the smile galleries. I mean, personally, this is something that's really near and dear to my heart, because really, as a marketer, I believe that the smile gallery is a huge factor in the practice's ability or our company's ability to deliver to the practice consistent quality patients. And what I mean by that is if there is some content, something to connect with the people that we bring to the website, the quality of patients tend to go up. So the Smile Gallery in concept exists to give dentists the ability to display their work. It's very hard, right? But it's also a really effective way to communicate key messages to your potential patients by using emotion. So if I look at your Smile Gallery and I see Courtney, for instance, and I look at her, I see the clinical before and afters, which we'll get into, I'm sure, but I'm also seeing a full headshot and a story, and that becomes a real person. So as we start to discuss this, I think it's a really big concept that we'll continue to expand on. So let's talk about the emotional connection. I mean, we talked about your connection to your Smile Gallery and how important it's been to you over the years, especially in the area that you practice in, to really be able to highlight these cases. But what do you feel the patients connect with most about a Smile Gallery in general, and when you go about this whole process?
Well, I think when we're talking about aesthetic dentistry or potentially even elective dentistry, most of that is an emotional decision. There are people who come to us that are needs based, and maybe they're wearing their teeth and they need function restored. But when somebody's coming in and they're self-conscious about a smile, or maybe they're a little embarrassed to talk, I've even had a patient come into me and be very raw in her emotions and say, I'm just embarrassed. I would just like to kiss my husband again.
Oh.
And I think when you have those kind of conversations, you realize that this elective or aesthetic dentistry is truly sometimes life-changing for people.
Mm-hmm.
And in order for them to be able to see, hey, how could I experience that, or who could help me do this? I feel like when you go to our smile gallery, or you go to a smile gallery, you want to see a person, you want to see, yes, the results, but the bigger, maybe sometimes more important component is you want to hear the story.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of people who come into our practice and are wanting to discuss different options, we generally bring up a smile gallery and show them somebody like them. We said, here's somebody like you, this same condition, this same worry, whatever the case may be,
Mm-hmm.
and here's how we were able to help them. Then they get to see, yes, the clinical dentistry that we did, but more importantly, they get to see the patient smiling at the end. And our big thing that we say in our office is we don't want to see just a patient smile with their lips. We want to see them smile with their eyes. So when you can see somebody light up from simply having a little bit of porcelain added to their teeth or a little bit of composite, to me, that's the game-changing factor. Mm-hmm. And that's where you're going to grab that patient's attention who's maybe sitting there in their home looking on a website and say, there's something different about this. I want that.
Yeah, let's explore that concept for a while, because I think it's to the heart of this overall emotional concept, and I really love the idea of the patient, or your goal of having the patient smile with their eyes. I mean, what are some of the factors beyond insurance, beyond convenience of location? I mean, if people are getting into the elective and aesthetic aspects of dentistry, I mean, what are they going to, or what has been your experience of how they're choosing you?
We've had people who view us as, well, they'll come into the practice and they'll see the name on the website and they'll say Smile Designed by Sisler. Mm-hmm. And some people write us off because they think, oh, all we do is aesthetic dentistry. And I think when it comes down to it, we don't do aesthetic dentistry all the time. We still do general dentistry, and we're just developing the relationships with people. So when it comes to somebody looking at that, I think we have to start with the relational component. When somebody's looking for somebody to accept their insurance, they're going to look on the website, they're going to find a name, they're going to go there. It's convenience driven, and they're just looking for a service to get a project done, to get treatment done. Yep. But when somebody's seeking out something emotionally, and when something that they feel is going to be life-changing for them, they're going to be willing to maybe travel to somebody where they know they're going to get a different result. Yeah. And they're going to look for somebody where they can build that relationship with and feel comfortable with, to spend potentially larger amounts of money, but also they're wanting that relationship with somebody before they're willing to open up about their concerns, or before they're willing to trust somebody to help them fix it. So I feel like when somebody's looking at a smile gallery and they're trying to say, well, how is this going to help me? Or how is this going to be any different than the guy who's next door to me and he's really convenient and he's open till 9 o'clock at night on a Saturday? Yeah. It's not a convenience-based thing. And when somebody truly wants something and feels like it's going to better themselves for it, I feel like they're going to be willing to travel. Mm-hmm. They're going to be willing to probably spend more money to do it. Mm-hmm. But you've still got to make sure the experience from when they walk in is relationally or emotionally based, because these are people who are coming to you who are probably self-conscious and are a little on guard. So for us to be able to develop the kind, caring, patient advocate attitude towards them, it allows them to see something different. It allows them to see that, hey, this isn't just a convenience thing. They actually care about me. I trust them now to pursue more aesthetic dentistry. I trust them to help me with this problem that has been crippling me for how long. So to me, I love your question about the emotional part, because that's something where we really try to focus on in our practice.
It's so interesting that you mentioned that they want a relationship, and that discussion where that led you to is ultimately trust, right? And so when we talk about a quality website, when we talk about a quality marketing approach, when we talk about separation or differentiation with other practices in the industry, this idea of trust really is a factor, because if they're looking for these bigger cases, if they're looking to solve a problem or achieve a goal, or maybe they're even just scared of the dentist, right? It comes down to whether they trust you more than the other guy, and that concept of relationship, being able to or them being able to feel like they can create a relationship, or they will have a relationship that's built on trust, is a big factor. And when you put these real patients in front of them, they can start to identify and connect to those patients and say, hey, Courtney, for instance, is reminds me of my niece, and Lisa reminds me of my sister, so these become real people, and they relate back to them, and they can build a relationship, and they can build trust much, much easier. So that's great. Great stuff. All right. So why don't we use that as a transition into talking about your Smile Gallery? I mean, I had mentioned you have almost 40 cases on there. Why don't you tell us from your perspective a little bit about your Smile Gallery and what you're most particularly proud of?
So our thing with our Smiley Gallery, and especially being in a small town, is obviously I kind of started with no photos, just like everybody else. Yeah. I mean, I came down and took over a practice where the gentleman, he didn't do a lot of aesthetic dentistry, so there weren't really any previous photos for me to show. I had to essentially build the repertoire of what we have. And, the way we started with the Smile Gallery is almost a little different now than how we do it now. Because I was just trying to get people in the door. I was trying to figure this out. And then one little thing that helped us grow maybe quicker, and that's the way I would describe it, is we started finding people in a small town that other people knew. So meaning we had people coming in who needed help with their teeth. We'd help those teeth, and we'd help those people. And then they became advocates of the practice. So all we would do is just simply, we started out kind of with more of a Smile Gallery in our office than we did online, because we would take the photos, and I would print them off, and I would hang them up in the office. And then we would essentially take that same photo, and I would send it to Dental Revenue, and I would say, I want this to be my full face photo, and this is my before and my after. And initially when I was doing it, I wasn't doing the emotional, I wasn't doing the story part. Yeah. That's something that kind of came later. So I think my advice to somebody would be, don't think you have to have this perfect polished thing. You just got to get going and get started on it. It's just getting the pictures so you've got the repertoire to show, and then you can begin adding them on the website. Then you can begin adding a story later, whatever the case may be. But I think sometimes people get overwhelmed and they think about it and they say, oh, there's just too much to do. Well, if you start small and start simple, it's not that hard to do. It's actually can be small and simple and still be effective.
Absolutely. Now, you had mentioned a little bit of this in the answer to your last question, but I want to make sure that people really understand this, and because I believe the characteristics in your Smile Gallery are really right on to what dentists should be thinking about when they put these photos up. So why don't you tell us what's included in each sort of piece of your smile gallery and why you include that.
Okay. So we always want a full face photo, and we want the simple before and after. On some of the smile gallery, if you see it on our website, we have focused here more lately simply on the before and after smile. We don't get into a ton of retracted views or, real up close views, because a lot of times that's not what resonates with a patient. To the dentist, we love it because it's our way of showing our work, and it's the details that we like to see. But for the patient who's looking at the smile gallery, they want to see the smile in the full face of the happy smiling patient at the end, but they also just want to see a simple, whether it's a front-on smile shot or a lateral smile shot. And, I kind of learned this by simply asking my wife. So I would do a case, and I would bring the case home, and I'd be saying, hey, I'm contemplating on using this one in the office. And she's like, oh, I wouldn't use that. And I was like, what do you mean? And I said, this is great. Look at how the light reflects off the teeth and all this texture and everything we developed. And it's just beautiful. And she's like, yeah, but to me, the general public, I don't see that. She's like, I just see a really zoomed in view of some teeth.
Yeah.
So that kind of was a mind shift, or like a paradigm shift for me, because I was like, okay, I've been looking at this from the dental aspect, but really I've got to look at it from the consumer aspect, or the person I'm trying to connect with. And so by keeping it more of, here's a smiling face, here's a pretty before and after of the smile, here's the story, we've simplified it, but also made it probably even more effective than what it was when I was trying to show off all these extra little details.
Yeah, no, it really hits home to me too, because, in my conversations over the years with dentists, the couple of things have been the biggest challenge for me to sort of reiterate is, the importance of the full headshot in the story, in the story behind the case, is extremely important, as you said. But a lot of times people really are in love with the retractable view, or a lot of times they want to put these specific pictures, and it's almost like they're so concerned about making sure that the work is perfect and the picture is perfect that it's almost analysis paralysis. They freeze themselves and end up not putting anything up that will connect, just because they're so particular. It's much more important, I think, at a certain point to show the transition, to show the patient and make them the star of the site, and then sort of incorporate the dentistry and then the messaging behind that. Because the more you can make the patient the star, the more successful you're going to be. So that's great. That's great. So I mean, here's a question I'm sure everybody is asking. I mentioned earlier in the podcast that a lot of people consider, if they have a smile gallery, they need to get a photographer. How did you decide that you were going to do this yourself rather than hire a photographer?
I just started. I had a simple camera that I was already using to photograph new patients and stuff like that. And I just felt like hiring a professional photographer was almost more of an inconvenience to me. Mm-hmm. From the standpoint was, it would be expensive. Then I would have to somehow coordinate for the patient to get there. And it's almost kind of an inconvenience to my patient. Like I'm going to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to do all this for you. It's going to look great. But at the end, you're going to have to go somewhere to get your picture taken. And then don't worry, I'll cover that. It's not a big deal. But then we'll wait to get those photos back. Then we'll see the proofs. Then from there, we'll get a few printed, compared to, hey, you know what? When you come back 1 month later, just to check things after we've put the case in, why don't you just wear a nice shirt and do your hair, and I'm going to take a couple photos of you. And to them, it just became, again, easy. I was removing any areas of resistance, like, oh, well, now I've got to go to this other place. I've got to go to this other photographer to get a photo taken, compared to, oh, well, I'm there and he's checking my teeth, I'm just going to get my photo taken. Easy enough.
Yeah.
So, and from that standpoint, I started with just simple pictures outside, and it grew to the point where I had people who got excited for the after photo shoot. They got their hair done the day before. They got a new blouse. They came in with makeup on, and we'd never seen them with makeup.
Yeah.
So it kind of got to be this fun thing, because it was almost a celebration.
Yeah.
I mean, they're coming back. We put the case in. We generally schedule them back at about a month out, just to let things heal and everything to kind of mature and look better. And so for them, by that point, they're already thinking like, okay, what am I going to wear for my after photo shoot?
Yeah.
And we have fun with them, and we might take a photo outside. We might take something inside, whatever the deal is based on the weather that day. But they got excited. And so the fact that we were offering this, it almost became kind of like a part of the service.
Yeah.
And even more of a draw. I mean, we've had some people who had never had a professional headshot taken, and we're standing there and saying, well, we'll do it right here in the office for you, no sweat.
Yeah.
And it's not complicated. I mean, most people who are already starting to do some aesthetic dentistry, who have a camera in the office, can step back and take a picture, of a full face photo. So it's not this complicated process. But our patients, to them, it seemed totally different, totally out of the norm, and they were ecstatic about it. And probably talked more about the after shoot than they did the dentistry. I don't even know.
One of the things as you were explaining that really came to my mind is I've been at dentist office when we brought in multiple patients to do video and photo shoots, and there certainly is a place for that. They've gone very, very well, and there's a lot of dental websites that have great galleries and great video in a sort of a situation like that. But there's something to be said about sort of the excitement. The case is still new. You're still in the process of completing everything. And it's sort of like that new phase where, some of this, getting back to the concept of smiling with your eyes that you said earlier, they're smiling with their eyes because everything is brand new. So being able to kind of do this consistently as the cases get complete, you tap into that portion of the process or the excitement. And I think, that can't be discounted either.
No, not at all. And I mean, again, you've got, back to the emotional connection. Here's somebody who came in potentially self-conscious, and you've helped them maybe get over their fears or get over their anxiety about their insecurities and get over the fear of maybe coming to the dentist. And now they're sitting there willing to let you take a full face photo of them.
Yeah.
Like, to me, that's pretty life changing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. So you had mentioned you started out taking the photos outside. How about backgrounds? I see, a couple different combinations of backgrounds, in the advice and process section of or portion of this call. I think we'll get into some more details, but, in general, can you explain what you've set up in your office and kind of what has worked best for that? And maybe that'll transition right into my next question, which is going to be, why don't we go through the process that you followed to get these pictures done?
Okay. So if we're going to talk about backdrops, the thing I would encourage dentists to do is not pick a busy backdrop. There are some people out there who get a backdrop printed with their logo on it, or it's like a busy wallpaper. You want something that's not going to detract from the actual person in the photo. So when we went outside, I generally found just like a very simple backdrop. If you look at some of the Smile Gallery photos on our website, it's just against like a green evergreen tree. So in the back, the evergreen tree is just kind of blurred out because we have them stand away from it. and it's not detracting from the person. We've since then moved from outside photos to inside photos, and really you have to kind of go with what draws your eye. I think the two classic standards right now are going to be white and black.
Yeah.
You're going to have a white background that's very simple, or you're going to have a black background that maybe is, in my opinion, a little more edgy or a little bit more formal.
Yeah.
Could be. Mm-hmm. So I like the white background the best for my photos, just because it tends to make the person themselves pop.
Yep.
So we'll tell them, wear a nice bright color, and we're going to shoot you against this white backdrop here, and then that way you stand out and you kind of pop out of the page. And that's not normally an issue. If you have somebody though, and you're using a black backdrop, and let's say they have dark brown hair, or they wear a black blouse that day or a black shirt, they kind of tend to start to blend in, and now you're trying to distinguish, like, where are what's background and what's person. So to me, white's always pretty safe and pretty easy, and I would just discourage the busy backdrop. Yeah. That's the way I would describe it.
Great. So how about the process? So let's start from the beginning. Okay, the cases being done, how do you approach them? You kind of explain that the picture is part of the overall sort of experience and process that you've created within the practice. But how do you approach them about this photo? How do you some questions that we'll get is consent, probably. How do you get their consent? How do you get them to want their photo on the website, etc.?
So we describe to everybody, we're like, when we start talking about aesthetic dentistry, it starts with a photo and it ends with a photo. So whether they're going to let me put them on the smile gallery at the end, I don't know yet, but I'm going to work my darndest in order to make sure they're a happy, smiling patient at the end, so they will let me do it. So for us,
Zach, let me stop you there, because I think that's a powerful point. I want to make sure people remember that. Because when I'm dealing with dentists, a lot of times they're like, oh, we have to take pictures, or we have to ask them to take pictures. And I think the concept of starting with a photo and ending with a photo really is part of your success, because then it's no big deal. And I'm assuming you're taking the full headshot on the beginning and after, or just on the after?
No, we're taking it at the beginning as well.
Okay.
And so here's the way I would describe it to anybody listening. You want a standardized photo set, meaning whatever photos you want for the after, you want for the befores. So for us, and for what we teach at the Dawson Academy, we teach a 21 different photo series. So every patient, the before, we get all 21 photos, and in the afters we get all 21 photos. They're all the same view, they're all at the same magnification, they're all at the same cropping. This isn't hard, but it saves you so much time and effort, because what happens sometimes is, if you get out of rhythm and you get kind of disorganized, is what I would say, and you have a really awesome after photo, but then when you go to look at all your befores and you don't have that same view in the before, you can't really correlate the two.
Yeah.
So if you keep it standardized, and it doesn't have to be 21 photos, maybe you're going to set something for your office. It's, I'm going to take these 5 photos every time on every patient, or I'm going to take these 12 photos every time, every patient. And then that way, we always have something to compare it back to and frame it. Mm-hmm. Now, here's what I'll say too, to that effect, is take as many befores as you possibly could, because you're never going to get another chance to take the befores. You can always take the afters. They're always going to be there. The dentistry is going to be there in the mouth to do it. But if you don't get the right angulation on that before, and then you've got the great after to go with it, it doesn't look quite right in the smile gallery. So to me, before you start prepping teeth, make sure you've got all the photos, look at them on the computer, make sure you have all the views you want. Then it's easy when it comes to the afters, because you're just taking the same set of photos, and now you find the 2 best photos that represent the case the best, and then you're done. So we still get a full face shot before, and we get a full face shot after, because sometimes it's the full face shot that is the biggest difference. You know, we've had cases where we've surprised ourselves, and the full face shot is actually more telling of the case than the actual before and after smile shots, because we'll have some people where, you know, they maybe went to a brighter shade and we did some nice veneers for them, and we're looking at the before and after and think, oh my goodness, we took 10 to 15 years off life.
Yeah.
But we wouldn't have noticed that had we not had the 2 to compare back and forth side to side. So if you're going to go into developing something, you're going to want consistency. So pick your standardized photos you're going to take. You take them before you start, and you take them after you're done. It starts with a photo and it ends with a photo. Keeping in mind that at the end, you know, you might have a patient who's not willing to let you put their full face photo up. Mm-hmm. We have that too, and I'm still respectful of that. And the bummer is that's obviously sometimes some of your most beautiful work.
Yeah.
But you still have to abide by their requests and their responses. But then on the other flip side of that is we have some people who say, you're never going to put me on that website. You're never going to put me up on the wall or anything like that in your office. And then by the end, they're so ecstatic. They're the ones looking forward to the photo shoot more than anybody else.
Yeah, I can imagine like some of the real transformations, you know, their initial thoughts about being embarrassed about being on the website or being embarrassed about being on the wall, it goes away because then they get so excited about everything else. And that's great. That's great. So, all right. So now we're, you know, we kind of talked about a lot so far. You know, we talked about the overall concepts of the Smile Gallery and why it's important and why specifically it's important to you. Sort of the history and background that you've had about the Smile Gallery, and we introduced some really important concepts, I think. And now we've sort of talked about the overall process, and I think the idea of you know, taking as many before and afters as you possibly can, because you never have the opportunity to go back and take those photos, I think is tremendous advice. You know, I think the idea of everything starts with a photo within the process and ends with a photo, I think is tremendous advice. And then, you know, having the same standardized process, I think, again, is something that would benefit every dentist. But what I'd like to do kind of as the next segue and to kind of complete this podcast is to just start asking you some questions about that I typically get from dentists. And I want to give you the opportunity to give them some advice. So you're not talking to me at this point. You're talking to the numerous people over the years that have asked me these questions. And just what advice would you give them if you were asked these questions? So the first I'll come up with is consent. Okay, obviously you said some don't, you know, want to give you their consent to be on the website. Some do, and then there's some on the fence. But how are you approaching them? What's your process of approaching them, and what have you found works best?
So I take the approach, if you're relaxed, they're relaxed. So think of it like this. If I'm going to go in and ask somebody for their consent for their photo, I'm going to go in and try to make it seem that it's not a big deal. Meaning like, hey, this is what we typically do. We ask you for the consent and where we would be allowed to use your photo. We greatly appreciate it because you got a stellar case, and we really want to showcase that to other people who maybe are in a similar circumstance and they could benefit from seeing your story. Mm-hmm. So we're framing it in a positive light to them that they could be helping somebody else, and we're framing it in the sense that this is normal operating procedure in our office. Okay. Mm-hmm. Most of the time, people aren't going to resist that. They're going to say, oh yeah, sure, I'm happy to help. We do have some people though who are going to say, I really would prefer you not put my full face up. I don't want people to know I had work done, or I don't want, I just don't feel comfortable with that. I said, that's fine. I said, would you be willing to let us use it in other avenues? And I have had that happen where, for some lecturing purposes, people say, look, if you're lecturing somewhere else around the country and you want to use my photo, that's fine. I just don't want to be here where everybody knows me in town.
Yeah.
So if they're willing to consent to that, we do list out, we have a photo consent. It's basically something I found online. I mean, you can find anything online right now.
Yeah.
I found online and basically tailored it for me and changed it to our practice and different things. So we have them sign that. It basically releases the responsibility for any kind of website usage, social media usage. For me, when I lecture places, for anything in our office, for any advertisements, for any publications, electronic or print, whatever the case may be. Now, if they've signed that, I feel pretty comfortable going ahead and using it how I see fit. But if I have something that is going to be major advertisement or right out in the public, meaning we did a billboard last year and we wanted to put some patients on it. Even though these patients have signed the consent, I'm still respectful of their rights. Yeah. So I will call them and say, hey, this is something we're contemplating on doing. Are you okay with this? If they tell me no, not a problem. We can find somebody else to take that spot.
Yeah.
If they say, yeah, I'm sure, I'm fine with that. Thanks for calling and asking. I think they appreciate the common courtesy of at least asking before we do something like that. But if a patient says, you can use my photos somewhere else, but just not here in the office, I'll ask them, where do you feel comfortable? And they said, you can put them on your website. I said, that's fine. So we'll make a note on the consent form, okay to use in the website, or we'll make a note on the consent form, patient is fine for us to use them anywhere, just not the full face. So we'll use maybe a simple before and after smile, even if it's on another form of advertisement. So again, I think being respectful, but also framing it in a positive thing that they could be helping somebody else, and that it's normal operating procedure in your office. People don't tend to question that as much. So yeah. they're much more likely to say, sure, go ahead, no problem.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now, tell me this, Zach. Are you having this conversation with the patient, or is an office manager? How do you approach that?
I'm the one taking the photos. I know in a lot of dental offices, maybe the assistants take the photo, and that's fine. I think it goes back to, we've developed a relationship with this patient over the course of treatment. Mm-hmm. So I try to do it again in a non-threatening, very relaxed atmosphere. So even while I'm taking them, say, hey, are you okay with us if we use this on our website and stuff like that? Yeah. I mean, it could be just as simple as in passing and doesn't have to be that formal. If they say yes, then my assistants or my office manager will go ahead and get the consent form and let them sign it. I don't know that it has to be me, because I'm not the only one who's developed a relationship with this patient. My assistants, they know everybody in the office by that point. So if they had any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. But I think an assistant or a front desk person who maybe has the form at their desk, I think that's perfectly fine to ask them too. But again, it's just you're approaching it in a respectful and more, hey, you could be helping somebody else out, based on the experience you had.
Great. Now, you had asked, you touched on this earlier, and I just want to kind of get a little bit more specific with it. The scheduling of these photos. Obviously, you had the concept of starting with the photo and ending with the photo, so it's the final sort of appointment that they have within their case. But is there anything specific with the scheduling that you would recommend?
Typically, I do these scheduling wise at the end of the day. We'll fit them in our day if it's what the patient requests. But typically, I just like to have the end of the day, so I'm not running behind. It's not a rushed experience. Again, this is supposed to be like the cherry on top, so to say.
Yeah.
For the process. So to me, I don't want the patient to feel like oh, he's kind of running behind and he's having to rush through this, and I got all ready and I wore my special shirt today and I got my hair done and all
Yeah.
this stuff. I want it to be like, hey, I don't have anybody after this, so if we need to retake this 20 times, let's go for it.
Yeah.
Um, does it really ever take that? Not typically. This is something that when we schedule them, again, we've put the case in, we've probably waited about a month, they come back. And when we take the final photos, we probably schedule about a half hour. I'll check the bite. I'll make sure everything's good with the veneers. As long as they're good, then we'll go and take some photos. If we take photos, I'll generally load them on the screen, or my assistant can load them onto the screen, and I let the patient pick. I said, which one's your favorite? You tell me. And, some of the ones that I would pick are not their favorite. So they say, oh, I really like that one. I let them kind of be the judge of that. And we'll narrow it down to get one or two that they really like and that I really like. And we'll say, okay, this is the one we're going to use. Are you at peace with that? I said, yeah. And if they say yes, then we have them sign the consent form. Again, this does not have to be a long process. If my day is over at 3:00 and I schedule this patient at 2:30 to 2:40, I'm still planning on probably being done by about 3 or shortly after.
Back to choosing the photos, you had mentioned that you narrow them down and let the patient choose. Is that for the full headshot only, or are you even letting them choose the clinicals that they like best?
What I found is patients don't they don't tend to care too much about the clinical before and afters. They care about the full face.
Mm-hmm.
So generally when we're looking at those, we're always just showing them the full face ones.
Okay.
They might see the others on the screen and that's fine. But the one thing we will do, and we always try to do at that photo appointment, is once they've picked their final and they say, oh, I love that picture. Sure, let me email it to you. Or, hey, how about I put this off and give you a copy? They'd love it. Yeah. But I also always bring up a before clinical shot and show them where they ended up.
Yeah.
Because to me, it's just that last sign, sealed and delivered, here you go. Because a lot of times these people develop amnesia what their teeth looked like before.
Yeah.
And they forget how bad it was. And now that's like, wow, I really did come a long ways. Here was my before, here was my after. And look, now I've even got this nice full face photo that I can show off to friends.
Yeah.
So I think it's just one more way to seal seal the deal of confidence in a sense.
Is there anything in particular that you think about when you choose the clinicals? Is there any rhyme or reason, or is it just, okay, this is a good example of the issues that he or she had going on, and this is and this picture represents, what I'm most proud of with this work? Is there a thought process that goes behind that?
Yeah. So the way I would describe it is I sometimes generally allow my assistants, or sometimes maybe more the front desk team, to pick the before and afters, because that's, again, like the paradigm shift for me. I wanted to show the zoomed in close-up photos, and they're like, so what are you trying to show me here? So I think you have to have that more general public eye approach. So for that, I'm always going to say, look, show the dentistry in the best light, meaning give them the best angle that's going to show the before and after. If you've got one that's a little crooked, or you've got one tooth in the smile that didn't turn out just perfect the way you want it, don't show that view. Show the other view that's making it look even better. Now, in doing so, we still want the patient to be able to see the difference, and we still want anybody else who would look at the photo to see the difference. But we have to keep in mind that a lot of times the patients don't want to see the lips all back. Mm-hmm. Much as the dentistry looks great like that, sometimes the patients are a little weirded out by it. Yeah. So we do it in very certain instances, but we don't do it a ton, just because that's not the way people view teeth in the public. They view teeth as they fit in my smile.
Yeah. No, I think that's fair to say. You had mentioned some of the patients when they come in for their photos, they're doing their hair and makeup, they wear something. And you had mentioned also, asking them to wear bright colored clothing to contrast to the white background. Are there any other special instructions? I mean, how specific are you getting with them for their last photo day?
That's pretty much it. I mean, our big thing is we just don't want them walking in like a t-shirt.
Yeah.
We say, look, we're going to take a nice full face photo for you. So why don't you go ahead, put on a nice blouse, and then just come in ready for your photo.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't want to impose on them that they have to be all done up.
Mm-hmm.
I still want them to be themselves. So if there's somebody who doesn't typically normally wear a lot of makeup, I don't want them to come in and be completely done up. That's not natural for them.
Yeah.
So I think when you give just the general guidelines, hey, wear a nice blouse, something that'll contrast against this. We're going to take a nice full face shot, because as soon as you say we're going to take a full face shot, they're already thinking, oh, I'm going to need to do my hair, makeup on, or something else.
Yeah.
But those simple steps, I think, in letting the patient decide. I've had a couple of guys come in and they just have like a hoodie sweatshirt on, and that's fine. That's them. That's what they want.
Yeah.
And it's relaxed. That's perfectly fine for that photo and that person, because that's telling their story. But I don't ever want a female patient to come in and not be ready, because they're the first person who will tell me, you're not taking my full face shot today, are you? Because I didn't put all my makeup on, and I didn't wear my necklace, and I didn't wear my earrings and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think just making it known, I'm going to take a full face photo, you do what you want.
Okay? Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. And I think that's easy instructions and easy to follow for the patients and any dentist trying to give those instructions. So as we start to conclude this, let's get into the technical aspects of it. Because partially I want to give some advice and some of your opinions on what they should use, but also I want to create the impression that this isn't the hardest thing in the world to accomplish either. So stuff like the camera. I mean, what are some aspects of a camera you would think are important to taking quality photos and really coming up with the result they're looking for?
If you have a traditional kind of digital SLR camera, even with a ring flash, there's really, I guess I would describe it as two settings, or one setting that you really have to change for a full face photo to a clinical photo. Sometimes, you could pre-program your camera to make it say, this setting is my full face, this setting is my clinical. Mm-hmm. So you could make it easier, or you could just basically line the camera up, knowing that from a technical aspect, if I'm going to take a full face photo and be standing back from the patient 5 to 6 feet, I'm going to take my f-stop and turn it to about an f5.6 to an f of 9. So what we're doing there is we're changing our depth of field so that as we stand back from the patient, we're getting a better, clearer picture of the full face, maybe from the shoulders up. Now, as we come in, though, we need to increase our depth of field, and we need to actually take our f-stop to like a 22, or anywhere from 22 to 32, and that'll give us a clear picture from the front tooth clear to the back tooth. One often or common error I see in photography is that they forget to change that setting. So they start with the full face photo, they have their f-stop at 9, they go to take the full face photo, they have the patient maybe sit down in the chair, and they're taking their clinical photos, and then they put them on the computer and they're like, man, these are all blurry, what's going on? The front teeth are in view, but all the back teeth are blurry. They didn't change the f-stop to a 22 to 32, because if you don't change that, you're not getting the depth of field to see all of the teeth. So I think that one little switch on the camera is probably the most critical when it comes to that. There are other things when it comes to lighting and how you're going to do that, whether it be inside or out, that I don't feel as are tricky to deal with, because a lot of the digital SLRs will meter light to know how much flash they need to output in response to the ambient light in the room. So I think for dentists, if you can preset your camera, by all means, preset the camera, make it simple for anybody who's picking up the camera to take the photo. If you're not going to preset the camera, big thing is remember the f-stop, changing that so that you don't have blurry teeth. And the other thing is, if you have issues with lighting, maybe if it's a really, really sunny day, you might not want to go outside and try to take that photo, because there's just going to be too much light and it's going to be washed out.
Yeah, no, one of the things about this, I just want to make sure the listeners know is Zach is getting a little technical here, and it's great. It's great advice. And what we're going to do on the slides, as you're listening to this, we'll provide this information. So don't feel like you have to sit there with a pen and remember all of this. We'll make sure that we make this information available, as well as some links to explain a little bit of the technical aspects of it, because I think it's very important that the settings of the camera are correct based on the picture you're taking. Now, what about, you touched on the lighting, specifically with the white background. One of the things that we see a lot, especially when people use a white background, is that shadow right behind the head, where it's sort of that halo effect. What are you doing with the white background to make sure that the lighting is right? Is it just the settings in the camera, or is it something you're doing to make sure that the shadows don't occur?
So if you don't want the shadow to occur, you're going to need light behind the patient, or you're going to need a different light source. So on these white backgrounds that you see in my photos, we do have a full dedicated photo studio in my office to take those white background photos. And we use studio soft boxes, and we're shooting in manual mode. So it's a little bit more advanced from that standpoint. If you're standing there with a traditional ring flash and you're just trying to take a photo, you're going to end up with the shadow. The only way to get away from that shadow is to potentially go outside and have, like the green background, or something that's going to allow the light to diffuse behind the patient, in a sense. So from that standpoint, if you're wanting a white background, or if you're wanting something like that, you're going to need to branch out and potentially look at other sources of flash. You're not going to be able to achieve that with just a simple ring flash. You're going to have to dive into maybe some soft boxes, or maybe some sort of professional studio equipment.
Now, a lot of this they can get just via Amazon or online, right? Just kind of look it up. Yep. and go through that.
You could go on Amazon and find a lot of that stuff and get it taken care of for inexpensive. One thing that I recommend to dentists, and I'm not trying to plug a product, but if they do photomed.net, Photomed is a company that deals with dentists and medical doctors for photography. So they can kind of get you a setup for studio lighting, or they could get you a setup for a ring flash or a camera of your choosing that will help you preload the settings, and they'll help you with anything you need. So for somebody who maybe doesn't feel comfortable with all the settings of a camera and all the different buttons and how to use it, I think Photomed offers a great product, because they can give you the camera, but then you get their expertise. So if they have an issue, if the dentist is struggling with a photo and they're not really sure what's going on with the camera, they can call Photomed, and Photomed will walk them through it. Because I tell people, I said, look, I am a dentist. I am not a professional photographer or anything of that nature. There are times when I still call Photomed and I say, hey guys, I'm struggling with this. Do you have any recommendations? These are trained professionals who deal with it all the time, who can troubleshoot it much quicker than I could, even if it was just Google or YouTube. So I feel like there's an element of, you might pay slightly more to deal with them or to buy your camera from them, but you're getting their service, which to somebody who views this as a very complicated thing is probably worth its weight in gold. So I would encourage them maybe to seek that out as well. But if you're a go-getter and you're ready to just try it and get going on it, you could find a lot of this equipment probably on Amazon and do it for less cost. But you're just going to need to troubleshoot it on your own in order to be able to get the photos you're looking for.
That's great stuff. I'm really glad I asked that question. Actually, it really opens a lot of doors and a lot of different angles. And I think, I want to sort of tie this back and just kind of make sure people understand the options. So if lighting's going to be an issue, you recommend them to go outside. If they're going to go inside, there's two options, but both options really require getting some additional equipment that will help with the lighting and the overall presentation. One is they could go buy it online through Amazon relatively cheaply, sort of do the research of setting it up and really having that ability, or use another third-party photo company that will sort of prefab a lot of what they need from equipment and camera. You recommend photomed.net because they're dental focused. But I think those are key points. There's some options available for dentists, and maybe they start out going outside just to get in the rhythm of doing this, and then they decide which way they want to go after that as they branch out.
Yeah, and I think the thing with going outside is always keeping in mind, if it's really sunny, probably not a good idea. But sometimes, maybe I should have said this earlier, when you get that, when you're not wanting that shadow behind the patient with a full face photo and maybe just a traditional camera with a ring flash inside, you want to get them away from a wall. Mm-hmm. The wall is what's creating the shadow. So even if you shot their picture and it was down a long hallway, or something of that nature, you're not going to notice that shadow as much. So, but going outside at least provides you some color sometimes, and most people like that.
Now, this white background, is it essentially a screen behind them, or is it, or are you taking the photo with the proper lighting and sort of adding that component?
No, really, that is just a pure white wall. It is a solid wall that we just painted white, and we just have photo soft boxes behind it. I have other backdrops that I could hang up if need be, but we shoot on white predominantly just because, like, when you look at our Smile Gallery, it just makes the person pop a little bit more, and I like the vibrancy of that.
And it's a real classic look. It just really has an element of sort of that high end feel to it. So I really love it. I would also recommend the white background if you can make it work without the shadows. The worst thing I think is when people try to go with the white background and all of a sudden there are shadows behind and people are like trying to sift through it. So no, I think that's great advice. All right, so I guess as we wrap this up, let's tie this together. We've talked about a lot. Conceptually, we've talked about what you do to go about your Smile Gallery. You gave people advice, some general advice about the patients, some advice about specific equipment. But as a takeaway, what would you say to the dentist that's thinking about doing this, that's listening, that maybe hasn't done this in the past? Where they start, what should they be thinking, and what can help motivate them to do this consistently from now on?
So my advice would be, aesthetic dentistry starts with a photo and it ends with a photo. So if you're not taking photos and this is something you're wanting to do more of, you need a repertoire or a portfolio to be able to show patients and make that emotional connection. Mm-hmm. People want to see other cases you have done, one, to prove that you can do it and you can pull off what they're hoping you can pull off, but two, so that you can show them somebody like them so they can develop that relationship and say, all right, he's done this before, he's seen it before, he can handle this, or she can handle this, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, again, I'm going to say you just got to start somewhere. You just got to get a camera and get going. You don't need a full studio setup to get going. You just need a camera and a willing attitude to try it. And it's not going to be perfect the first couple times you try it, and they're going to be blurry, and you're going to have an angle that you didn't like, but you make the most of it, and you get better by refining your craft. To me, practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes you better.
Mm-hmm.
And the better we get at taking photos and showcasing this, the more dentistry that's going to walk in our doors from them seeing it and understanding that we're serious. So again, get started and get going, and you got to start somewhere.
That's great. That's great. Well, guys, this concludes this episode of Dental Revenue Live. Thanks so much, Zach, for joining us today. I personally am very passionate about connecting dentists to great patients. And, the Smile Gallery is a huge part of that. And so hopefully the listeners were able to kind of pick up on how passionate I am about this, how passionate you are about this, how doable of the experience this is, and really come away with this can-do attitude. So thank you so much again, Zach, for joining us. I think you did a great job, and it was extremely valuable.
Hey, thanks again for having me. Again, this is something I'm passionate about and love to talk about. So again, anytime.
Oh, awesome. So thanks so much. All right, so our next episode, which will be released in May, this one will come out sometime very soon, next week, will be a great follow-up to our discussion today. Dr. Doyle Farino, who's a dentist in Lexington, Kentucky, will be discussing the importance of patient testimonial videos. So again, to this concept of emotion, this concept of differentiation, testimonial videos are another great way to get real stories in front of your potential patients. Really some of his videos are truly inspiring. And they really have been a key part of his success on the web. I think one of the things Doyle will share with us is that he hasn't always been successful on the web, but when he started to include some of these resources, when he started to include some of these stories, when he made the patients the star of the site, he started to really have some success. So that's great. So everybody, thank you again for joining us today. I hope this podcast inspired you to focus on your Smile Gallery. If you have any questions about what to do, please feel free to reach out to me at Dental Revenue at any time. I can also connect you with Zach. I'm sure he'd be willing to give you advice or answer any specific questions. And as always, we wish you the best of success with your practice, and may this year be your best year. Thanks so much, guys.